When I wrote this song, the attempt was to capture the dichotomy of a God who is so awesome, so mighty, so amazing, yet and still he desires an individual relationship with each and every one of us. But we often find ourselves and our hearts far away from him. But even with that knowledge, he still desires a relationship with us. He still loves us. If you know it, sing along. If you don't, listen to the words, and I pray they touch your heart. You hold the world in your hands. Still you know the count of hairs upon my head. At your word all creation will obey, and still we run away. You give life and sustain, and before I was born you knew my name. Yet my heart finds its way far from you, and still your love remains. It's your love, stronger than mountains, greater than oceans, reaches the valley, restores the broken. I can't thank you enough for your unending love, stronger than all sin, greater than all pain, reaches the old me, gives me a new name. I can't thank you enough for your unending love. Oh, your unending love. Who am I that you would love? Even after all the wrong that I have done, who are we that you would care so much that you would give your son, your only son? It's your love, stronger than mountains, greater than oceans, reaches the valley, restores the broken. I can't thank you enough for your unending love, stronger than all sin, greater than all pain, reaches the old me, gives me a new name. I can't thank you enough for your unending love, your unending love. Yes, yes, Lord, there's nothing like your love. Oh, the love that you give brings freedom to live a life changed for you. Your light shining through. Come on, sing. The love that you give brings freedom to live a life changed for you. Your light shining. Let them hear you sing. The love that you give brings freedom to live a life changed for you. Your light shining through. We can't thank you enough for your love and blood that washes all our sin. In you we win. It's your love, stronger than mountains, greater than oceans, reaches the valley, restores the broken. I can't thank you enough for your unending love, stronger than all sin, greater than all pain, reaches the old me, gives me a new name. I can't thank you enough for your unending love. Your unending, never failing, always there. Your unending love. Your love's like no other. It's your love. Who am I that you would love? Even after all the wrong that I have done, who are we that you would care so much that you would give your son, your only son? It is your love.
Good evening. Welcome again to our online devotional. This becomes just such a sweet time for our church family to gather, both church online and on Facebook Live. Don't forget, this weekend we'll have our worship gatherings online exclusively at 6 p.m. Saturday, 9:30 on Sunday morning, and 11:15 on Sunday morning. And this is a great time if you are not in a small group or a life group to get engaged in one, and you can just contact the church office, and I know our adult ministry or our campus pastors will be happy to help you set up. You may say, well, how do I get in a group if groups aren't meeting? We have been meeting virtually online through a Zoom platform or Microsoft Office, different things, and so there are some great ways. So if you're feeling a little alone, like you have a little more time than normal, that might be a great thing to do. Well, this evening we're in Psalm 9. We've just been walking through a psalm each evening, and obviously in a few minutes we don't have a time to take apart every verse of every psalm, but it's really more just to get an idea from each psalm. And psalms often were written in hardships, emotional responses to things that were hard in people's lives. And that's one of the reasons we thought this would be a great thing just for us to go through. And here's what Psalm 9 does. It starts off with the psalmist saying, I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart. I will recount all of your wonderful deeds. I will be glad and exult in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High. And so the psalmist starts with really just saying, I'm going to remember what you've done and I'm going to worship you. And this is really looking back to the past to say, what has God done in my life? What has he done in people's lives? What has he done in history that's worthy of recounting? In fact, in verse 14, we get this word recount again. It says that I may recount all of your praises, that in the gates of the daughter of Zion, I may rejoice in your salvation. And that word in Hebrew is the word sapar, and it's the exact same word that's used in verse 1 when he says, I will recount your wonderful deeds. In other words, what the psalmist is doing is he's saying, I want people to not just kind of mindlessly go into worship, but I want them to number and to think back and to say, where has God been faithful? There's a great hymn that's been sung for generations, Great is Thy Faithfulness. And I think one of the reasons that song has endured, besides the fact that it's rooted in Lamentations 3, is that it's a beautiful thing just to say, God, you have been faithful from generation to generation. You've been faithful in my life. And when we remember that and worship God in that and recount, it helps us in our present situation. But we don't just see the psalmist looking back and thinking about the past. We also see the psalmist looking to the present. And it says this in verse 9. It says, the Lord is a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. And that word stronghold is a word that means, in essence, a high security, something that's out of reach of the foe, inaccessible. And so what that's saying is that God is so strong that there's no foe that can touch our God. And it's a beautiful picture, and it's a way of saying in the present, I can't just say I'm in a difficult space, but instead I can say, I can rest in exactly what's happening around the world because I have a God that is not vulnerable to all of the winds of whatever storm may be raging around us. And then in the future, we see another aspect, and this is in verse 18, where the psalmist says this. It says, "For the needy shall not always be forgotten, and the hope of the poor shall not perish forever." And what that is it's looking to the future, and it's saying those who are suffering today can know that they will not be forgotten. That God, although people forget him, will never forget those who have turned toward him, whatever their need is, whatever their situation is. Now, hang with me just for a second. In this psalm, there are several words for challenges or difficulty. Here's the first, oppressed, verse 9, which is a word that has just the idea of basically being in a place of distress, saying that the world is closing in on me. Then times of trouble, verse 9, is a word that means drought, basically. A word that means you're in a time when things are challenging, difficult. You don't know where your next meal is going to come from. That's the time in which the psalmist says, my God is a stronghold. And then there's the word needy in verse 18, which I just referenced. It says, for the needy shall not always be forgotten. And here the Hebrew word is ebyan, which means vulnerable. It means to be willing in a bad sense, those who can be pushed around, the pliable, the vulnerable to pressure, the stronger interest. But in a good sense, it means those who will gladly do the will of God. In other words, it's used different ways in the Bible. But here, the idea of somebody being needy is one who basically needs other people to show them the way forward. And it says, the needy shall not always be forgotten. And then anah is the Hebrew word for the poor. It means to be low, which also appears in verse 12. Now, why do I just point out those words? I point out those words because wherever you are today, there's a chance that whether it has to do with the coronavirus or not at all with the coronavirus, that in some senses you have felt oppressed or under distress, that you've been troubled, that you feel needy, that you feel poor or maybe afflicted. And whatever emotion you might be feeling today, the psalmist gives us this answer. He says, look back to the past and recount what God has done, so worship God because of what he's done. Look in the present to him being a stronghold in the midst of everything that's going on. And in the future, you can look forward and say, God will remember those who are suffering. God will make right what has felt wrong in the midst of our lives. That is the promise of this psalm. It's a simple word, but it's a word that I find very helpful. And so let's take a moment and just pray together. And tonight I want to use a prayer from the book of Hours. And I'm going to just say a first part, and then the part for the people is this, and that is, you are with me, Lord. And so maybe you can just say it where you are. Maybe you can type it in where you are as a response to this. Through every moment of this day, and then all the people say, you are with me, Lord. Through every day of this week, you are with me, Lord. Through every week of this year, and all the people say, you are with me, Lord. And through every year of this life, you are with me, Lord. So that when time is past, by grace, I may at last be with you, Lord. Today, whatever word describes your emotion, know that you have a God who has worked in the past. Recount his deeds. You have a God who's a stronghold today, so turn to him, and a God who will remember you in the future. So he is with you wherever you are, whatever you're facing. Have a good evening.